Hey, Peter Buswell here for drvoip.com. We're going to update some of the videos we've done in the past on SIP trunking. I don't think we've done one since about version 8, and there have been many changes. So I'm going to do this in two parts. First, we'll take a look at the simplest of the SIP trunk configurations, which would be a tie line. And in part 2, we'll do the same configuration out to the PSTN through a SIP provider. So ShoreTel version 14, in my opinion, in our opinion, is the only system you really want to get involved with when it comes to configuring SIP trunks. In ShoreTel, ShoreTel has always used SIP, or a derivation of SIP called ShoreTel SIP, from the onset, and that's primarily because they were way ahead of the curve in implementing SIP before SIP was standardized. It wasn't until about version 8 or so that they had SIP capability. Version 9 was SIP extensions, and 13 improved it, but 14 was where we really started to um, enjoy parity with a PRI. So a traditional TDM PRI trunk could now be matched by a ShoreTel SIP trunk, and that's what makes version 14 so helpful. And there are a number of enhancements in 14. We have some diagnostic tools that are really helpful. I can't tell you how important Wireshark is to troubleshooting, and in the ShoreTel system they've set it up so that you can do remote diagnostics quite easily, and that's a big plus if you have to dig down and take a look at packets. And in terms of SIP standards, we're adhering to most of the major um, requirements for your SIP configurations. Now keep in mind, SIP can be simple, but the devil is in the details, and you have to pay attention to a lot of the small nuances of the configuration and the differences between your version of SIP and the other guy's version of SIP. So at any rate, in this tutorial, we're going to take a quick look at configuring a SIP tie line, right? Establish a SIP tie line. We're going to tie two ShoreTel systems together. One system will have PSTN trunks and an extension range of 200 through 299. The other ShoreTel system will have extensions 300 to 399, and when they dial 9 to make a phone call, it's going to go out the ShoreTel system number 1, and we'll take a look at how to set that up. In the second video, we will change the PSTN trunks on the System 1 to be SIP trunks, and we'll take a look at the importance of a session border controller and probably compare a couple of different implementations. I have set up SIP trunks using Cisco firewalls and Sonic firewalls, and just plain Cisco 2800 series routers. And I've also set it up with no session border controller. Don't recommend that. It's not a smart thing to do, but just in the interest of science, we'll take a look at all of that. So the basic setup of the SIP tie line, and you're going to do this on both of the systems. We need to log into the ShoreTel Shoreware Director, go to Call Control Options, and define things like the DTMF payload, and enable the SIP trunks, and set up our differential service control points. Make sure that 5040. In the old days, since ShoreTel was predominantly an MGCP implementation, it was really kind of cool because all of the media flowed on port 5040, which meant you could prioritize at the transport layer, and that was cool. But when you move to SIP, you disable that, and the RDP media flow can be across thousands of different ports. I suspect that this will go away in its entirety as ShoreTel continues to move towards a 100% SIP deployment. That's my opinion. That's not the benefit of anything I know internally. You'll go to sites for the site you're configuring the ShoreTel SIP trunk. You'll also need to get your resources. Resources are basically where we go into a ShoreGear switch at a particular ShoreGear site, and we allocate some number of ports, 5 SIP trunks per port, for however, excuse me, however many simultaneous calls you're going to require. You also need licenses, so make sure you get the licenses sorted out, certainly within 45 days of going live. You'll need to define SIP profiles. Now, there are two classes of SIP profiles in ShoreTel. There's SIP profiles for extensions and devices, and there's SIP profiles for trunks. Generally, extensions register with ShoreTel, and trunks typically use a peer-to-peer relationship in which the authorization is established by the two ends based on IP addresses. But that isn't to say that you could not require authentication, digest authentication, which is defined in your trunk group, and we'll take a look at that. So you'll set up, ShoreTel provides a couple of default profiles. There's something called a standard tie line that generally gets the job done, but you may have to get in there and do some different changes to really fine-tune your implementation. In the actual trunk group setup, we're going to deal with the SIP timer. We're going to determine whether we need tandem trunking. In this example, we will need it because one PBX is going to dial 9 and make phone calls through the other PBX. So tandem trunking will be needed, and we'll decide whether we need to prepend a 9 on the digits that are sent to us from the originating PBX or not. We'll set the destination, just the same things you would normally do setting up a traditional analog or PRI type of trunk group. You're going to answer the same questions, do essentially the same things. You would set up the OPX extension range, which will point dialed digits in that range to the trunk. So normally in a trunk you would say folks with this class of service, executives, when they dial 9, they can use this trunk or not. But in the case of OPX extensions, it becomes part of the extension range, and the system is really not subjected to the class of service, so keep that in mind. And then finally, we're going to add individual trunk circuits into the trunk group, one for each simultaneous path that we wish to have for our voice traffic. So with that, let's dive into ShoreTel and take a look at configuring all of these options. This may be a bit difficult to follow in terms of visual appearance because we'll be looking at two different ShoreTel director portals because we're tying two ShoreTels together. I'll try and keep them straight if you can. So over here at 192.168.1.250, we have a headquarters site that has the server, a 220T1A, and a virtual conference server. And it will be speaking to another ShoreTel at 172.16.1.5. I happen to have these through a VPN, site-to-site VPN. This guy's got an SG50, and this guy has no PSTN connections at all. So every time the folks here dial 9, they're going to be going out the other PBX. So let's take a look at the configuration, and this, for most part, will apply to both sides. We'll go to call control, and then down here to options. And what we're looking for here is a couple of settings that we just want to be certain are in place. You can go through all of these as you may be using them for your traditional TDM type circuits. Enabling your SIP session timer, the default value is 1800 seconds. Setting your differential service control point at 184. Prior to, I only noticed it in 14, maybe it was in 13, but historically ShoreTel did not separately mark their call control. So when you're setting up your SIP call control, your MGCP call control, and you wanted to mark it, in other words, you wanted to say it's really important. It's not quite as important as the express forwarding that we want to set up for our voice encoding, but it's important. We want to make sure that it gets handled and appropriately marked AF something. So this is up here in the voice, we're talking about express forwarding bits. And so historically in the past, we would use access control lists that would look for anything coming from the ShoreTel server or the ShoreTel switches. It's not clear to me yet if encryption is used on the conference server or whether those things are in fact class marked. But if they are, we want to make sure that we set our voice quality for express forwarding and also assign call control for our quality of service. Okay, the next thing that we're probably going to want to take a look at is sites. Let's go over to sites and drill down into the site for this particular PBX. And we clearly, of course, want to know where our SIP proxies are, what switch they're on. We're going to want to make sure that we have an appropriate level of bandwidth allocated for the SIP circuit. And then, of course, we're going to want to go and get resources. So what we'll be doing there is going to platform hardware, drill down on the voice switches, and we'll be going to set up by typically you'd be selecting it in a drop-down box here. This particular switch, it's done a little bit differently, but you can see that you would normally select something here, but at the end of the day here we're just going to set it by setting IP phones as SIP trunks up here. In this case I'm using only 3 SIP trunks, and it allocates resources for that purpose. Next, you're going to also have to take a look at your license page and make sure that you have appropriate level of licenses. I'm just setting up 1 trunk just for an example. And then next place we'd probably go is to the actual trunk group. So head over to trunks, go to trunk groups, and I declared one to be SIP trunks, and the SIP trunk, this is where you would set up username and password for the other end to authenticate with you. You can do it for all calls, inbound, outbound. In this situation, we're talking about a private connection between 2 PBXs. We're not going to bother with that. There will be no authentication. We're not going to be using a translation table. This you might use if, let's say, you had extensions in this system that were the same as extensions in the other system. So you could set up a translation table to add or subtract digits in such a way that you could set this guy up to deal with that. We will be using tandem trunking because we want the other end of this connection, if they dial 9, they're going to select the tie trunk, and their calls are going to come across this trunk group and out to the PSTN connected to the PRI on this switch, on this site. We're not going to add an access code here for the outbound side. We could do that. We could put a 9 in here, and you may have to do that. It depends on your dialing plan, but in this instance, we'll be able to just pass the digits from the other end, and that'll be good. You'll set your greeting. Again, all of this, everything else here is just the same as you would set it on any other type of trunk group, right? I've selected here area code 300. I tend to use 300-999-1000 for any time I can use that many digits. If I can, I'll just use 300 because there is no country code or area code that would fit, and so this would never be chosen. Now, I'll point out here that typically your class of service, so if we go to users and class of service, it's typically where you indicate that executives have access to these trunk groups. Now, I'm not checking the tie line there. It's not necessary for me to do that because the trunk group, access to this trunk group from this end to the distant end, is going to be dependent on what extension number they dial. So down here, we're going to go to where it says off system extensions, and here we're going to create a range of 300 to 330. So if the system sees someone pick up a handset and dial 300, it will, regardless of their class of service, route them to this tie line. So access to this tie line is not controlled by class of service or dialing 9, but if it were, I wouldn't necessarily want this guy to be selected, so that's why I get the fake area code. Okay, so we've got this trunk group set up. So what's the next step? The next step is go add some individual trunks to that trunk group. So you're going to go here and you're going to say add a new trunk, add site. You pick the site, in this case 2244 Faraday, and we're going to add it into the trunk group. Well, in this case, where our trunk group is entitled tie line, and we'll say go. And at that point, we'd give it a name, and we'd name the switch that the resources are on. In this case, we only have one switch. And then what it's looking for here is the IP address of the proxy at the other side. Now, the most common mistake folks make here is they think if you're connecting to a ShoreTel that this wants to point to the ShoreTel headquarters server. That's a big mistake. It wants to point to in this case, the ShoreGear switch at the other end of this tie line that is managing the SIP proxies or SIP resources. And in that case, this would be 172.16.1.60. And then here, if I wanted to create 5 trunks or 10 trunks or whatever, I just fill that in, and it would automatically go and establish those. Go and establish that. So keep in mind that what it's looking for here is the IP address of the SIP proxy, not your headquarters switch at the other end. Likewise, when we look at this at the other end, it's not going to want to point at the headquarters server. It's going to want to point at the IP address of the ShoreGear switch that's doing the proxies at the other end. So that pretty much takes care of the configuration at this end. We're going to start here with the diagnostic evaluation, which you can get to either by clicking on Diagnostics or Quick Look and then you can click on any one of the switches in Quick Look, or there's a nice little guy here, go to Diagnostics and Monitoring. I've already got him established here, and this is for the 192.168.1 PBX. And what I want to do here is to go to Diagnostics, Remote Packet Capture, and go to the switch that we want to capture packets on. This is the beauty of this diagnostic tool, by the way. I mean, normally if I wanted to capture packets on this, I would either have to find the Ethernet switch port that's connected to and mirror it to the port that my computer is on to copy those packets. But ShoreTel has done a nice job here. We can just say we want to copy packets. Here I am on the headquarters server from .250, want to copy packets from .60, and it just magically happens. So we're going to say go ahead and apply that. I don't want to record for 20 minutes, though you can start and stop this. Let's set that for 5. And then here, I don't want to capture every protocol. I just want to capture SIP and TLS. I don't even want ShoreTel SIP. This is typically the message stream between switches. I don't know. Let's go ahead and accept it. And at that point, your capture has started. Okay, so we're capturing packets now. Now here you're just going to have to trust me. I have a soft phone here on my iPhone, and I am at the remote end of this connection. Okay, so we've set up 2 calls, and I'll show you how we'll just verify this here. Just close this capture. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, now what will happen here is that packet capture will get added to the list here of packet captures, and we'll be able to go in by clicking on the packet capture. Now ShoreTel doesn't ship Wireshark with each system, so you'll have to install it, but I strongly urge you to go ahead and put that on your server, have it available so that you can take full advantage of these wire captures. It'll take a minute or 2 for it to show up. In the between time, there are status information that you can look at for your trunk groups, for example, and you'll see here that the tie line, SIP tie line, is in fact showing that it's up and how many trunks are configured and what's in use, etc. Right, let's go ahead and click on the, well, you can see it showed up here as the date and time's correct. We'll go ahead and click this guy, and that will go ahead and open, go ahead and bring up yet another copy of Wireshark. I must have a dozen of them. Okay, and so you can see the actual configuration excuse me, that we just went through. And typically when I come in here, first thing I like to do is go to Statistics and go to the protocol hierarchy and just take a quick snapshot of what we got there. So you can see that 100% of our packets were Ethernet version 4, and we can see user datagrams. That's typically your RDP, was about 92% of the data capture. So that's useful information. The other thing you might do is telephony, go to VoIP Calls, and this will show you the actual stream of communication, right? So we can see we must have made 4 phone calls because the first one went to extension 115 and it completed. The second one went to out to the PSTN. Here's the phone number I dialed, and it was completed. I fat-fingered something here on my soft phone while I was jerking around, and then I set it up a second time, and it was completed. So you can you can do a number of different things here. For example, you could take a look at the flow. So if I go here, when I called extension 115, you can see the flow. If you click on flow, you'll see here the actual invite. This is what's called early offer, because the session description protocol, in which we're letting the other end know, hey, we're a telephone, not a camera, and we use G711 and so forth. Sometimes that's not sent in the invite. When it is, it's called early offer. We're trying, we're ringing, and finally we acknowledge, we set up the call, and then ultimately 200, we're okay and the call is complete. So this is another way of looking at what has happened here. Okay, let's take a look at another one. This time, let's go to telephony. Let's VoIP calls. And here are our flows. The original phone call to extension 115, and then this phone call, which was a dial 9 call. So from it started on the 172.16 end of this trunk. So let's go ahead and prepare a filter for that. Drill down on that guy. And you'll see it up here now, and what we're going to do is just go here and say apply, and we are now just looking at those calls. So we can see that the source call was 172.16.1.121. That's the IP address of my soft phone, and the proxy at the distant end is the shore gear switch. It's .60. Protocol was SIP. This was a request, and the type of request was an invite. And you can, as I said before, you can drill down on this, right down from the Ethernet level all the way through the IP level, right to the session initiated protocol level. Come on, I'm trying to grab this with my mouse here. And you can see the actual SIP message exchange. This is what makes SIP more fun to troubleshoot, because if you have any experience with HTML, any type of web communications, this should be very easy for you to follow. So the invite was to the phone number I dialed at the SIP proxy address of the shore gear switch, SIP port 5060 and so forth, and you can just go right through the sequences. You can trace the path. There's a field here called via, and that just shows you every step through the communications path. This was, the last guy to have this call before it hit that proxy, and so forth. And we can see that just as we did when we looked at the flow, we can see trying, we can see ringing, we can see OK. Now, when things are broke, it's not going to say OK. It's going to say 400, 500, but you'll be able at some point to figure out where it got broke. Notice here that there's this other guy in the equation here. It says SIP 104 at 192. Well, who is 104, I wonder? So back over here, we can see the source and destination. So handset, proxy, proxy, handset, proxy, handset, ringing, right? Proxy, handset. We get connected to the proxy, and then what happens? Keep in mind this was a dial 9 chord call. So the next thing you see here is handset, proxy, handset, proxy, proxy, handset. But over here, something happened. There was another request made, and it was by extension 104. And I can show you in the directory for this system that 104 is in fact the auto attendant. So basically what you have here, we didn't talk to the auto attendant, but what we have is the system out dialing the phone number that we dialed. And so that's where the trunk-to-trunk piece comes in. At any rate, it turned out okay. So that's a quick overview of SIP from a remote handset through a tie line back to the corporate PBX and dial 9 and out the PRI PSTN. The next clip, we'll take a look at this as it goes through an actual SIP trunk to the PSTN. I hope you have found this informative, and I thank you for viewing.